Okay, so Germany, potentially allocating a staggering 5% of its GDP to defense. I mean, that headline, it really stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
We're talking about a monumental shift here. And that's exactly what we want to unpack for you today. What does this actually mean?
Exactly. It's easy to just see that number, 5%, and think, okay, it's about budgets. But it signals something much deeper, doesn't it? A fundamental rethinking, maybe, of Germany's security role in Europe.
Right.
So for you, this deep dive is really about getting a solid understanding of what's driving this decision, the debates it's already sparking, and, what the consequences might actually be down the line. We're looking at the sources to pull out those key insights.
Good. So let's dive into the specifics of the announcement itself. The foreign minister, Johann Wedeful, made a pretty bold statement, didn't he? Pledging to hit that 5% GDP target. And what's really interesting, he specifically mentioned the level that former U.S. President Trump had been calling for.
Right, which is notable in itself.
And this comes just as Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who's only been in office about a week, he declared his aim for the strongest conventional army in Europe. That's quite an ambition.
It really is. And there are layers here, While Wedeful seems fully behind the 5%, NATO's chief, Mark Rutte, had apparently suggested something slightly different, like 3.5% for pure military spending and maybe 1.5% for other security things.
Okay.
But Wedeful went for the full 5% target. It shows a strong signal from at least part of the new government, aligning with that figure pushed previously by the U.S. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. But, where the rubber meets the road is always the money. The finance minister, Lars Klingbeil, he sounded a bit more, cautious.
Predictably, maybe?
Yeah, saying the final spending amounts depend on the upcoming NATO summit. That's in The Hague next month, right? So you have this big target thrown out there, but the actual budget lock-in, still TBD.
That classic tension, isn't it? Political goals versus fiscal realities. And it's interesting hearing from Roderich Kieswetter, too. He's a former senior military guy and now a politician in Merz's own party.
Right, CDU.
And he called this a paradigm shift. That term really jumps out. It underlines just how big a departure this feels like from Germany's, established post-Cold War defense policy.
Definitely.
But he also added, quite rightly, that this kind of huge change, it's not going to happen overnight, which, given Germany's history, makes sense.
And that historical context is so important here. Germany's reluctance, its deep-seated hesitancy to spend big on the military, it's obviously rooted in World War II.
Of course.
Then after the Cold War, the threat seemed to diminish and spending just plummeted, not just in Germany, but particularly there. There was this reliance, almost an assumption, that the U.S. would handle European security. The sources even mentioned the numbers tanks, artillery going from thousands down to just a few hundred. It's a really stark picture of how priorities shifted.
Exactly. And that backdrop, it's not just, historical trivia. It's essential to grasp the sheer scale of what's being proposed now. For decades, the thinking was different economic strength, soft power.
Yeah.
So this new talk suggests a really radical shift. Makes you wonder what specifically pushed them to this point.
And it's not like the German armed forces, the Bundeswehr, are starting from a position of peak strength right now. The sources paint a pretty worrying picture, frankly.
Yeah, worrying is a good word.
Shortages of key weapon systems, real problems actually recruiting troops. They missed their target last year by over 20,000 people.
Wow.
Even after trying a social media campaign. That points to something deeper than just needing a few more ads.
And those specific examples stick with you, don't they? The equipment failures reported from places like Afghanistan and Mali, helicopters grounded, rifles that literally didn't shoot straight.
Yeah, I remember those stories.
It makes the abstract shortages very real. And Eva Hogel, she's the parliamentary commissioner for the armed forces, she was blunt back in March, said the military has too little of everything.
Everything.
Air defenses, drones, satellites, AI. You name it. It's not just about topping up supplies. It sounds like systemic gaps.
It's a sobering assessment, though we should remember, Germany did just hit that NATO 2% GDP target last year. So some progress was being made.
True. And obviously, Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 was a massive wake-up call. That's when then Chancellor Scholz announced that huge 100 billion euro special fund for defense.
Right, the Seitenben Fund.
Exactly. And big orders are going in new submarines, those F-35 jets. But like the sources note, that stuff takes years, decades even, to arrive and integrate.
So it doesn't fix today's problems immediately?
Not at all. So going from hitting 2% recently to talking about 5%, that's an enormous leap.
Mind-boggling almost.
Absolutely. I mean, 5% of German GDP, We're talking over 200 billion euros a year, a figure that honestly would have seemed completely unrealistic just a short while ago.
So how are they even proposing to pay for it?
Well, it seems Chancellor Merz's coalition has managed to find some financial wiggle room. They've apparently eased some debt rules and earmarked extra funds specifically for defense and infrastructure. So the mechanisms seem to be getting put in place.
Interesting. And Merz himself is framing this spending boost in economic terms, too, partly.
Yes, he made that argument in Die Zeit, said that investing heavily in defense, especially if it's buying European-made systems, could actually stimulate Germany's economy, which has been pretty sluggish lately.
A kind of security stimulus package?
Sort of, yeah. It tackles security worries, especially with Ukraine ongoing, but also aims to boost industry and jobs. Plus, he talked about needing to, and I quote, gradually reduce our dependence on the U.S.
Ah, the strategic autonomy angle.
Exactly, strengthening Europe's own capabilities. And you have Armin Paperger, the CEO of Rheinmetall, a huge German defense company, saying basically, we're ready, they've ramped up capacity, they can deliver. It suggests some level of industry preparedness.
Okay, but surely not everyone's thrilled about potentially spending 200 billion euros a year on the military.
Oh, definitely not. Predictably, there's pushback. Peter Boehringer from the AfD, a party known for being more Moscow-friendly, he called the 5% target completely absurd.
Right, expected from them maybe?
Yeah.
But what about within the government itself?
That's maybe more significant. Ralph Stegner, he's from the SPD, the junior coalition partner with Merz's CDU, he came out strongly against it. He argued for disarmament, not an arms race.
Strong words.
Very. He condemned spending billions on weapons, only to then spend billions more rebuilding places like Gaza, Ukraine, Aleppo. He called it collective madness. That highlights a real ideological split right inside the coalition.
That's a major fault line then.
It absolutely is. That internal dynamic will be crucial to watch.
So, stepping back and thinking about this for you, our listener, it's clear Germany is at this potential turning point, a really pivotal moment for its defense policy. This ambition, this 5% figure, it sends a massive signal. But wow, the hurdles look enormous. You've got the current state of the Bundeswehr, the sheer financial challenge, the logistical nightmare of scaling up that fast.
And the political disagreements we just mentioned.
Exactly. It really throws the complexity of this whole thing into sharp relief.
What strikes me is that gap. The gap between the sheer scale of the ambition's strongest army in Europe, 5% spending, and the documented weaknesses we talked about.
Right.
Closing that gap. It's not just about money. It needs a total overhaul, probably. Procurement, recruitment, strategy. Everything. The political will might be there at the very top now, but making it happen on the ground, that's the real test.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's try and bring this together. We've done a deep dive for you into Germany's really quite surprising pledge or potential pledge to boost defense spending maybe up to 5% of GDP.
We've looked at the reasons, the context, the current not-so-great state of the German military.
The economic arguments being used to support it, and importantly, those dissenting voices raising serious questions.
Which leaves us and you with a big question to chew on, I think. Considering everything we've discussed, the huge spending targets, the current shape of the Bundeswehr, what do you think is actually the single biggest obstacle Germany faces in trying to build the strongest conventional army in Europe? Is it the money? Is it the recruitment? Is it the political infighting? And maybe think about the ripple effects, too. How could this potential shift in German power fundamentally change NATO in the coming years?
Yeah, lots to consider there. That interplay between the political drive, the economic facts, and the military realities, it's going to be fascinating to watch unfold.